All right. Let me just give me a couple of minutes. Let me just see if we can get a couple of people on. Then we're gonna kickstart. You all see the title. We got a couple of people on. Sure. What's up? Right. Another 4 minutes we can start. People in here. Live. There you go. All right. One second. All right. First and foremost, we give all praises, all glory to Yahweh. By Hashem Yahweh Shai. That's by his name. And the Mashiach name is Yahweh Shai. And everybody should know the Most High name is Yahweh. It's a blessed Shabbat. You know, we had an excellent week. You know, anytime that, you know, we get life and strength and breath in this body to praise the Most High, it's a good week. So, you all see the title. It's called the Inquisition, and this is an important part of history, of our history. And all right, you can't hear me. All right, let me see if I can check my mic. Check the volume. Hold on, just bear with me. Can you hear me now? All right, it's all good now. All right, good. So let me start with saying, first and foremost, I'm going to give all praises, all glory to Yahweh. I do so by our high priest, our big brother, our king, Mashiach Yahushai. Like I was saying, it's a good week. We get have health and strength to praise our God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that is. So we still bashing Christianity, but the main topic of this history course we're gonna get from a scholar I actually, got some edification from, and I want to pass it on to you guys who could follow this channel. His name is Benaiah Israel. Benaiah Israel. Get some good content, just like the other scholars, Dante and Ron Dalton, Hebrews to Negroes. You all know a couple of them very well. We got some good scholar in Israel, Shabbat Shalom, Bancroft. So I want to share this and walk through with you what transpired with our people after the death of the Messiah. And this is important. Y'all can get some good edification out of this. I think this is a history gap, because a lot of people, they can't even go back in history and trace their origins, meaning that you can't tell what happened before you got off the boat. In between Christ and the boat, what happened to our people? So we're looking at the time John was writing Revelation to the time of the boats reaching the shores of America, or the Americas, Caribbean. We have a gap. Jeremiah 17:5, what it says. But the thing is, the Most High restoring everything back, knowledge increasing. So it's Jeremiah 17:5. It says, and thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in a land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. So it says that we can discontinue from our heritage. We strip of everything. So without further ado, let me just get right into it. Let me just play the footage. So, like I was telling you guys, this is a part of our history. The channel is called Benaiah Israel. Benaiah get a lot of good content. So let me just play. Hold on. All right, I'll start.
And also, I just wanted to kind of lay that foundation. Let's go into our review.
Hold on. Make sure I get up in the fire.
So basically, one of the curses that would befall the children, the true children of Israel, would be that their sons and thy daughters would be given to another people. Okay. Now let's take a look at another.
Just let me know in the comment section
of the many curses in Deuteronomy 28. And this particular curse says, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they, the sons and daughters, shall go into captivity. Did you catch that?
Mm-hmm.
Let's read it again. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they, the sons and daughters, for they shall go into captivity. Okay, so now that we have that backdrop, I just wanted to kind of lay that foundation. Let's go into our review of the references that we
his name right here,
reviewed within our first video. Not all of them, just a handful.
Write that down.
So in our first reference review, we're going to just talk about John Ogilvie one more time. And first reference review, we're going to just talk about John Ogilvy one more time. And if you don't remember, John Ogilvy is one of our high value references, and it's the reason why we refer to him as a high value reference is because of the time period that his reference comes from, and also who the reference is. So this reference comes from the 1600s, and also it comes from John Ogilvy, who at the time was the cosmographer and geographic printer of the king. And I believe it was King Charles II. So John Ogilvy would be someone that we would want to know, get an idea of what his thoughts were, because he would have, we would expect him to have the ear of the king at the time. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with the references and the page numbers, that sort of thing. If you want that, just take a peek at the other video. But we're just trying to help speed things up here. So I'm just going to go straight to the quote. So the quote that we want to review here with John Ogilvy it's within the red rectangle on the screen. But you can see where it says, let's see if I can find my place here. It says that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither. So John, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before. So 200 years before the writing of the book that we're reading now. So this book was written in, I believe, was 1670. So 200 years before that, it was in the 1400s. And we know, of course, King John was around. The King John of Portugal was around during the 1400s.
All right, so let me just pause it just to give you a quick understanding what he's going to explain. The Inquisition is actually a persecution of the Jews in the time of Portugal and Spain in the 1600s. Right? It's called the Spanish Inquisition. What they're doing is expelling all the Jews out that region to West Africa. And what that does is it put the Jews that's in that part of Europe, expel them to West Africa with the Jews that fled from 70 AD, and then they're going to come and round them up and put them in slavery. So look at the timeline. This is John Ogilvy reporting what the king is doing in Portugal. Pay attention. These are sources, historical sources. All right.
So far so good. So it says, John, the King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before. So in the 1400s, John sent a colony to the west coast of Africa, to St. Thomas. It says, to the west coast of Africa. It says, whom though the unwholesome air destroyed, yet the place was not left desolate. For he sent new inhabitants who first settled Guinea, and I got to have a map of Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas. So he sent new inhabitants who settled those three places. And it said that so they might be better used to the air. That the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion. Okay, so we understood that the King of Portugal sent the Jews to the west coast of Africa. He sent them to three places: Guinea, Angola, and St. Thomas, because they refused to embrace the Roman religion. And it's
all right. So now, if anybody know the prophecies, what will happen up before the people of the book, whenever a conqueror came in, they gave us a mark, and this is the mark of the beast. The beast is the ruler, right? So this is saying that anybody who didn't embrace the Roman religion, it caused their children not to be baptized. They was shipped off to West Africa. St. Thomas is an island of West Africa. Angola is in West Africa. Guinea is in West Africa. And the reason they put us on that side is because they had a colony there. Portugal that was actually ruling or actually colonized these portions of the land. Africa is at this point, it's the 1400s, was colonized by different Europeans. The French colonized Africa, the Portuguese colonized Africa, what Napoleon from? I said France, Germany, all those people, King Leopold, all those people colonized different regions. But the part Portugal owned, they were shipping their Jews to this part of Africa. So you have 70 AD when the Southern Kingdom fled from Roman persecution into West Africa. They was already settled there from a time. Now you have the Jews, which Paul was writing to. These epistles were went in the various parts of Asia Minor, Portugal, Spain, whatever. These people getting persecuted now who wouldn't embrace the Roman religion. And he's going to explain to you.
And it said, and caused their children. Now, this is what I wanted to key in on this go around. It says, and caused their children to be baptized. From whom? So from the children, coming thither in great numbers. So did you catch that? Let me back up a little bit. It says, and cause their children to be baptized, from whom, from these children, coming thither. And where is thither? The west coast of Africa, in great numbers. Then it says, most of the present inhabitants were descended. Okay, so just want to key in on the fact that it was the children that were coming to the west coast of Africa in great numbers, and that it was John Ogilvy's belief that most of the present inhabitants were descended. Okay, so now that we have that, I just want to show you and kind of refresh your memory on the west coast of Africa in Guinea. So here's a outline of the Guinea territory on the west coast of Africa, just in case you're confused.
And if anybody would know what this is called, this same map in gold, that is called the Gold Coast. The reason why they call it the Gold Coast is because not only does it's rich with minerals and soil, but they got all the ports them there, and that's where they get all their resources from, and the slaves would actually ship from here. Guinea is all this province right here, will highlight it over here, and then they have Ghana. All these was where the conquistadors are actually we call them the colonized or oppressors came to ship our people off. So he got a map and he's going to show you St. Thomas, Guinea, and I think Angola.
As far as what it looks like. So here's what it looks like. Angola is right below Guinea there. So it's pretty much the whole west coast of Africa. So this entire territory, all this yellow here, were that's where the Jews were sent. And that the descendants of these guys were the children. It was the children that were sent here from the west, from Portland, or from the king of Portugal. Okay. All right. So let's go to our next reference here, just for a quick review. And so this is another high value reference that we went over last time. But again, we're going to focus on the references to the children this time. So this comes from the official chronicler of King John, Garcia de Resende. So Garcia was the official chronicler of King John. So we would also want to know what Garcia would have to say, right? He's not just some guy. He's a official chronicler. Now it says, I'm going to skip down to the bottom to the second underlying red on the line here, where it says, well, I'll start in the sentence here. It says, in 1493, those who could not pay had their children taken away from them, baptized by force, and deported to St. Thomas or Sao Tome in order to be raised as Christians. All right, so we see there where it says, had their children taken away from them,
And Christians in the curses. Let's get the curse. Notice what he said: to be raised as Christians. If you go to the book of Deuteronomy 28 and 64, let's get that one real quick. Deuteronomy 28 and 64. But let me read this reference again. It says, their children taken away from them, baptized by force. Wow, baptized by force, right? And deported to Sato Tome, St. Thomas, in order to be raised as Christians. So that was a punishment to be a Christian, right? Because you didn't want to keep they didn't want you to keep your faith, because they knew who you were, or who we were, who we still are today. Deuteronomy 28:64. It says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even to the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which thou nor thy fathers have known. The children didn't even know this God, even wood and stone. And read verse 65. And then do it as no favor. Watch this. And among these nations, where he's going to scatter you and serve these gods, thou shalt find no ease. Let's keep going.
Baptized by force and deported, they were sent to St. Thomas in order to be raised as Christians. So again, we see that it was the children that were taken away from the Jews, from the parents, and sent to the west coast of Africa. If you can kind of just sit back and think about that for a while, what that must have looked and felt like, you'll get an idea of how traumatic that had to have been. But again, this is can be found in Deuteronomy, right? Because we read that before. Deuteronomy 28, I believe, was 41. It said that the children would go into captivity. So here, we're actually seeing it play out in these references. Okay. All right. Now going over to our third quote here, and this is pretty much says the same thing, where it says, I'm going to skip down to the last sentence in the underlying section here, where it says, nor was this all, since the king wrested from their parents all children between the ages of 3 and 10. And what we noted before was that in this reference, it says 3 and 10. And previous other references, we see that it was increased from 3 to 10 to 3 and children in the young adults in their teens. And then it was later increased to 3 and young adults in their 20s. So that it explains how you get great numbers of these Jewish children on the west coast of Africa. All right, so now that we've established that, I just wanted to make sure that you keyed in on the fact that it was the children that were sent over to the west coast of Africa. And that knowing that, you can begin to see how a race of people can began to be separated from their history, right? Because they're separated from their parents and they're being raised to be something else.
So we can skip through it for time's sake. But this is a channel y'all guys could in your spare time, just view it, just see it with good.
Reference, and then we're going to move to our antiquity references. So now that we know that the Jews were sent to Africa, right? They weren't. They were sent by the Portuguese and the Spain, and they were from also the expulsion edicts in Europe. That they basically, gathered on the west coast of Africa. And sometimes, the question is, well, did anyone know about it? Other than the people that dumped them there, the people that placed them there. Did anyone know about it? Well, what we found that is that there are some contemporary researchers that have run into the truth, so to speak. So one example would be Alan Godby. Alan Godby was a researcher. He was a Duke professor in the early 1900s, and in his book, "The Lost Tribes and Myth: Suggestions Towards Rewriting Hebrew History," in the back of his book, what I'm showing here on the screen is just on the back of his book, the map. You can see where he identifies locations of Black Jews in Africa. He calls them, Negro Jews, Moorish Jews, Falasha Jews, and Yemen Jews and Berber Jews. So in his book, he identifies, of course, Angola Jews. So the Angola Jews, we've read those references in the previous video, but Alan Godby does a good job of showing you exactly where those Jews are. Same thing with Saint Thomas or Saint Thomas Jews. And this is an interesting view here of the Nigerian Jews. It shows you where the Levite cities were located off of the Niger River. And then you also see B'nai Ephraim, that basically means sons of Ephraim. And then below that, you also see where it says terracotta heads patterned after 500 BC in the foreign quarters of Memphis. So the takeaway here is that the contemporary researchers like Alan Godby and others were able to identify where these Israelites were on the west coast of Africa. Now, I'm going to review a reference by Hannah Adams before as a background here. So Hannah Adams, she wrote it in her book in the 1800s as well. She wrote that the Jews that lived in Portugal and Spain professed to be from the tribe of Judah. So what that means is that the Portuguese and the Spanish understood that the Jews in their territories were from Judah. Why is that significant? Well, when we look at maps of the west coast of Africa, and you may have seen this map before, but the thing here is that this is basically the slave coast. You can see where it says Slave Coast here at the bottom, and then at the top there's another name for it. It says Kingdom of Judah or Slave Coast. So there was two names given to this territory. But the question is, who gave this sliver of land that name? Like, who called this this area here the Kingdom of Judah? Just think about that for a moment. So, and if you're, probably if you're guessing that it was possibly the Portuguese, well, let's not guess. Let's look at the references. Now, this reference comes from a book called Africa and Its Inhabitants, Volume 2. And this comes from page 410. Do want to point out that above I do have a map here. It's another French map. I didn't have the details here, but you can also see that it's also calling the Slave Coast the Kingdom of Judah. So if we look at a reference on page 410, it says, skipping to the second sentence, it says, the old writers called it Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews, while the neighboring river Alala, whose real name is Ephra, became the Euphrates. And of course, if we take a look at our map at the top, you'll see, if you can look closely at your screen, at the top of that yellow circle, it says Euphrates there. So that we do see that. We can confirm that in maps. Just want to point that out. So if we keep reading, it says, during the flourishing days of the slave trade, from 16 to 18,000 were annually transported from Judah. as the Portuguese called this place. Okay, let's stop right there. So we just said that the Portuguese called this place, and we'll read later. It was the Portuguese slavers that called the place Judah. Now, why is that significant? Well, a couple of things. One is, so this reference confirms that it was the Jews that were on the west coast of Africa, and it also confirms that it was Jews that were being sent as slaves. Remember, it says that during the flourishing days of the slave trade, from 16 to 18,000 were annually transported from the Judah. Okay,
So
so
what would make a kingdom in Israel, a people fled or run to the west coast of Africa? Two reasons. They could blend far as they look like the people from that continent, but not only that, they could hide very well because West Africa, and you could look this up. I did my research on it. West Africa was uninhabited until the people who was transported from the transatlantic slave trade, us, went into that region. The populated parts of Africa was Egypt, Ethiopia, um, Mali, not Mali, sorry for that, um, Sudan, but it wasn't Sudan then. It was it's one more, but it was more like East Africa. West Africa wasn't inhabited. You could look this up, do research. And the reason why we fled in there because we always used to flee to Africa. You could look at when it was a famine with Jacob, his sons, they went into Egypt. When Christ fled into Africa, you know, so Africa was more of a safe haven because we blend more into Africa. Abraham and all went to Africa, you know, at one point.
we know that. So this tells us that it was the Jews that were sent into the transatlantic slave trade. It was the Jews that were placed on the west coast of Africa, and it makes sense that this place would be called the Kingdom of Judah by the Portuguese because the Portuguese placed the Jews there under was it King John? King John. So we read those references that said as much, right? So it's not us saying that; it's the references that are saying. All right. Now going to our next quote, and this quote comes from, you can see the name there, but this is a
And all these books, you could write them down. They historical sources. He giving you the page. He giving you where to look, the author, everything. So it's what we call scholarship work.
This is a quote from the French book, and it comes from page 272. And let's read it. It says, Judah, Wida, and has different names there, but Judah is an ancient city frequented since the 16th century by Portuguese slave traders who gave it its name. All right, so let's read that again. It says, Judah is an ancient city frequented since the 16th century by Portuguese slave traders who gave it its name. Its inhabitants were called Judaic, and indeed, they were regarded as a remnant of the scattered tribes of Israel. All right, so we can see here that the Portuguese gave the slave coast the name Kingdom of Judah. Okay, just wanted to establish that. And as a cross check, this is just another reference kind of thrown in there just to hammer home the point that these Jews were in fact black Jews. Let's take a look. It says, I'm going to see 3 paragraphs here, but I'm going to go jump down to the second paragraph in the sentence where it says, a remarkable fact in the history of Luango and the Empire of Congo is that the country, according to a statement which was fully credited by Oldendorf himself, a writer of most correct judgment and of unimpeachable veracity. So this is an upstanding guy, right? Is basically what the William Armistead is saying. It says, contains many Jews settled in it. So to answer the point, or to answer the question, did they know that there were Jews there on the west coast of Africa? And what we're finding out is that the answer is yes. But let's keep reading. It says, who retain their religious rights and the distinct habits which keep them isolated from the other nations. Though thus separate, let's pay attention here. It says, though thus separate from the African population, they are black. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. We don't need any interpretation around that, right? So they are black and resemble the other Negroes in every respect as to physical character. So basically, they look like them, but they're Jews. It says, it is probable in allusion to this case that Pennington, Pennington's another author during the time, in his book, which is called Textbook, says, the descendants of a colony of Jews originally from Judea, okay, settled on the coast of Africa are black. Okay, so just want to make sure that we know that these Jews are the black Jews. Okay. Now, with the Jews being on the west coast of Africa, we saw that on some maps it was called the Kingdom of Judah, or the Slave Coast. What you may not know is that there were other names that were given to that territory or that area, and these other names actually shed light on who the people were there. Okay, so you'll see I have a map on the screen, and you can see where it says it's giving you 3 names for this region. So Udan, Lam, or Negro land. So Udan, Lam, or Negro land. And we'll take a look at the word Udan here shortly. But look at, you see Lam, or Negro land. So I just wanted to let you be aware of those names there. So let's read a reference about Udan.
So after you give this reference, I'm gonna close with the video, but you guys can follow his channel, and it's a 3-part series. I'm watching the second part actually, because I wanted you to get an understanding of the Inquisition. So let me state it one more time. The Inquisition, or the Spanish Inquisition, is the king actually expelling the Jews from out the land because they wouldn't convert to their religious beliefs. But it's actually persecution, actually, and they shipping them over to West Africa because they have property or colony in West Africa, and then later on they're gonna come back and get them and ship them off to the New World. So the Inquisition is basically an expulsion out of Europe. It's expulsion and torture to our people. All right. These nations them always hated us. So I'm gonna get a quick, let them finish off the same part when he breaking down Udan. It only take a couple minutes, and then we got a couple of scriptures, edifying scriptures. And like I said, follow Benaiah. His name is Benaiah Israel. He got a lot of videos on history of us. We need to know our history so we could actually teach it to our children and give our other brothers and sisters who don't have the history edification. So let me just finish up.
See your reference on the screen. That's the title and book. Authors on there as well. You can see the publication date. And This comes from a page as close to the front of the book. The front of the book has a bunch of Roman numerals before it gets into the numbering of the book. So I have that at the bottom here. But just wanted to point out where it says the Jews of Soudan are, according to my informers, divided into many large and small tribes, with whose names they are unacquainted. Their mode of life in some countries is pastoral, but the towns are filled with traders and artificers of that faith, who gain substance at their several employments in the service of the Muslims, under whose government they live as vassals. So we just took it. We were just looking at a map, right, where it said Soudan. So now we're reading where, the Jews are. The Jews are there. So this is just another confirmation that the Jews were in Soudan. And I'm going to skip down a bit, just kind of speed things up, where it says the lands occupied by these people cover a wide extent between Messina and Kabi. So basically, from this quote tells us that that the Jews were kind of spread out over a vast territory. Okay, and and then it gives a quote from Bashar. Now, Bashar is an African, Black African in Africa, and he tells us why the Jews are there. It says they. Let's see, but they are not esteemed like us, for they are a people hardened in their sins and obstinate in their infidelity. It says the anger of God is upon them. So they knew that God's anger was upon them. And it says, and therefore are they given to the rule of the Muslims. So it was their understanding that God's.
That's not, but you see, I said it was given to the rule of the Muslims. Now, if anybody know what the Arab slave trade, it happened before the transatlantic slave trade. But when I read Deuteronomy 28:64, remember what it says. He will scatter us from the one end of the earth, paraphrasing now, to the other, and there we shall serve other gods which our fathers didn't know, even wood and stone. So now listen. So now the Portuguese ship us to West Africa because we didn't want to convert to Christianity. So they shipped the children off. Now the Muslims ruling. That's wood and stone right there. So we in between a rock and a hard place. So you got Christians expelling us. Then you got the Muslims enslaving us. And after the Muslims finish enslaving the children, the Christians coming out to get us back, to get us to America, to get us enslaved over there. So you can't even win between these two faiths. And these with our people in Christianity and Islam. You can't make this up. These
anger was upon them because they had broke God's laws, and that they were given to the Muslims to do with as they will. And then if you keep reading in that book, if you actually get a copy of that book, you'll see where Bashar then goes on to describe some of the colors of the Jews. One of the things I did learn as I was researching, what you'll find out the same thing is that whenever there's an African giving a description of color, Africans tend to be a bit more descriptive. Like they differentiate between the hues of brown, whereas if there's a European writer giving a description, they tend to be more black and white, not necessarily acknowledging the different gradients there. So because of that, I have a little blurb here at the bottom of the this reference just to point out that the Bashar goes on to describe the Jews as brown colored instead of the pitch black color of some Ashanti. All right. Side note there, but just an FYI. Okay. So some of the other names of the Jews on the west coast of Africa. So we saw where we had Soudan there.
Okay, we can stop this right now. Go back to the screen. Stop that. All right. So in detail, we get an understanding of what was the Inquisition. They had many Inquisitions. Our people got expelled from all throughout Europe, but that one was a major one. What happened in the 1400s, and the 1400s, right before the transatlantic slave trade, it's like 110 years before that kick off. Actually, probably like 100, because the transatlantic slave trade started in the 1500s, in the mid or late 1500s. Uh, that's facts. So a lot of people don't know that. You could actually research the Spanish Inquisition for yourself. Um, Esau, science, or not science, history, or Caucasian history, they like to mess with a lot of stuff or don't be accurate. But that was our people actually who took part in the Spanish Inquisition. So there's a lot of atrocities what happened to our people in that video. You can name them off in chronicle in chronological chronology. Let me say chronicle logical order. Let me say it right. So you got the Sahara slave, the Arab slave trade. You have that one first. That happened like in 700 AD. After the Arab slave trade, then you had the what we call the Dark Ages, what the Europeans call the Dark Ages, but the Spanish Inquisition was another one. When our people got expelled, children was ripped from their parents, taken to West Africa. You know, like I said, subscribe to Panaya Israel. You could go to Dante Fortson. They got some good stuff too. So I'll be pulling videos and we'll be examining also. And then the last one was the great. We can get it in Daniel. Let me get that one time. Right? We can get that. We ain't bringing no scriptures pertaining Daniel yet. Not that I could remember. So Daniel 7. I may want to go to the Mark account. Let me go to see through thy precepts I get understanding, eh? Let's get some precepts in. All right. Shalom to everybody. In the chat. I'm about to read this. Not read, watch it. Sorry for that. Salakia. Make sure I get this. Daniel 9, 10. All right. All right. This is Daniel 7 and 25. Make sure right there to the end. It says, on the 10 horns, what beast, ancient of days. Oh, let me get this precept. Well, Christ first. Great evil, bear with me. There you go. All right. This is Matthew 24. Let me read the Mark 13. Mark 13, 14. Sorry about that, Salakia. It says, "But when you shall see the abominations of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that read it understand. Then let them that be in Judea flee into the mountains," right? "And let him in the housetop not go down into his house, neither enter in therein. Take anything out of his house." All right. So when you go to Daniel 9, that's where I wanted to. That was Christ actually talking about the abomination of desolation, right? But he's saying a great evil. So watch this. Let's talk with this great evil with Daniel. See, this is in Daniel right here. Daniel 9 and 13. It says, "As it is written in the law of Moses." If anybody know this law is talking about Deuteronomy 28 and 68. "As it is written in the law of Moses, all this evil," talking about all the curses actually, "all this evil has come upon us. We are made, sorry about that, yet made we in our heart, in our prayers before the Lord our God, Salakia, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand the truth." So he's saying all this evil, right? "Therefore the Lord has watched upon the evil and has brought it upon us. The Lord our God is righteous in all his work which he doeth, for we obeyed not his voice. So, O Lord our God, has brought thy people forth out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and has gotten thee renowned as it this day. We have sinned and done wickedly." So basically, that's Daniel pleading for the nation because he know the curses could be poured upon us. So I can jump up one more verse, Daniel 9:11. He said, "Yea, all Israel, that's everyone, have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they may not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, because we have sinned against him." So that's it right there. That was so we can go over them. The Muslim trade, the slave trade, that's the sub-Saharan slave trade that happened in 700 AD. The Inquisition with the Spanish Inquisition. Then you had the transatlantic slave trade. All Europeans was against us. All nations is against us. I take you to the last verse before I close this out and close this out right now. We can go to Psalms, and you know what we can get. 83. Let's get Psalms 83. My last scripture. Psalms 83. From the top, is there a song or a psalm of Asa? It says, "Keep not thy silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up their head." So this is saying that we have enemies, or the Most High have enemies, and it said they have lifted up their head against thee. So they against him. He said they are taking crafty counsel against thy people. That's singular, right? "They have consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation." That is singular, not plural. Follow with me, Psalms 83 and 4. "They," that's plural, "have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. It's going to call the nations. The tabernacles of Edom, that's the white man. That's the nation that pushed Christianity. And the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, they are the Muslims. And of Moab, Krishna, Brahma. No, actually, Moab god is Buddha, and the Hagarians, Africans, Egyptology people, or so forth. Gabal, another African nation. Ammon, Japanese. Amalek, the white man. The Philistines is the Palestinians with the inhabitants of Tyre. Ashur also joined with them. That's another Muslim nation. And they are hoping with the children of Lot, Salah. So you had all this conglomerate of nations out together, still out together, hate your guts. And you know what the religion tell us? We all one. But when we come to be all one, what happened? Chain around our neck. Slavery, oppression, George Floyd, you name it. They don't love you. They hate you. But anyway, please do your due diligence. Study for yourself the history. Look up the Spanish Inquisition for yourself. Follow the brother who I posted the video. We have some good information. He have other videos. He have a 3-part series on just that topic. I snip out parts of it so it could spark your interest. Look up Benaiah Israel. Read your Bible. Enjoy your Sabbath. All right? All praises. So with that, I say Shabbat Shalom. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Shout out to everybody. Minecraft. And I'll say Shalom.